This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
CBD is a game changer sweeping the nation. This hemp extract is the natural way to elevate your mood, eliminate aches and pains, reduce anxiety, and keep you sleeping all night long. It can even cut your workout recovery time in half. Get in the game today with 20% off all orders of CBD and lavender products from Lavender Lane, a lavender farm located right here in Milan, Michigan. Just go to lavenderlanemi.com today and enter coupon code DETROIT for 20% off your entire order. Guys, look, these amazing products are infused with calming lavender to maximize their effectiveness, meaning your CBD items only take minutes to take effect, which is way quicker than those pills you were about to swallow. On top of it, they are perfect for men and women. Lavender Lane has lab-tested CBD creams, tinctures, and roll-ons that are perfect for any situation, even if you're on the go. Put your health back in your hands by heading over to lavenderlanemi.com and entering coupon code DETROIT for 20% off your entire order of CBD and lavender products. What do you have to lose? Your satisfaction is guaranteed or your money back. So if you need lavender gifts for your loved ones or just looking for the natural way to ease your discomfort with CBD, go to lavenderlanemi.com and use coupon code DETROIT to unlock these miraculous benefits of CBD and lavender. That's lavenderlanemi.com. And remember, use coupon code DETROIT for 20% off your CBD and lavender products from Michigan's own Lavender Lane.
Under a cold, gray October sky, the four horsemen of Notre Dame got their ass wrecked. Next on Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Carter. Waits for it. Hit. Caught.
This is no time for that. In the pocket and a sack. Tim Jamison.
Brady gets terrific. Throws it and a touchdown. Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him. And a leaping interception by Woodson.
Harbaugh back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown, Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Sack. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
We're going to win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue! Greetings and welcome to this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. I'm Steve Deace, Brandon Brown, Michael Spath from Wolverine Digest and WTKA Ann Arbor will be joining us here a little bit later on. But we begin with a wrecking. That's what Michigan did to Notre Dame on Saturday night. And the Wolverines came out with a purpose and a passion, almost as if determined that someone had to pay for this season. And unfortunately for Notre Dame, they were going to be that someone. Michigan outgaining the Irish by over 200 yards, running the ball for over 300 yards. A defense that held Notre Dame to 93 total yards until it started emptying the bench in the middle of the fourth quarter. And what I loved as well about the worst beatdown that the University of Michigan has given to a top 10 team since Texas A&M in 1977. You know what I loved the most? One play to me. One play. And when this one play, it's subtle, but it is significant. And when this one play occurred, I looked down, I literally saw hair growing in real time, Chia Pet style, like animation. I saw hair growing out on my chest. I mean, that scene in It's a Wonderful Life when Violet is walking down the street in that sultry dress. Now in our day, we call it a church dress, but in 1946, it was edgy. And Violet is walking down the street in that sultry dress, and George is sitting there talking to Ernie, the cab driver, and Bert, the cop, and they all can't help but notice Violet as good, red-blooded American men. And then after she walks by, Bert looks at his watch and says, I got to go see what the wife is doing. I had one of those moments when Michigan declined the holding penalty just so Don Brown could unleash the Wolverines on a poor, unsuspecting backup quarterback at Notre Dame one more time. And when that happened, I screamed out, he's back! That's our Jimmy. That's the what's your deal, Jimmy? Where have you gone? What's your deal, Jimmy? The maize and blue faithful turn their lonely eyes to you. But we found him on Saturday evening running up the score. Hold up, I think Dylan McCaffrey just threw another garbage time touchdown. Tacking him on, Kirk Herbstreit said, sending a message. You bet. And it's the message we have been waiting for. We've sat here and wondered these last couple of years, where has Jimmy gone? What is with the docile, stoic Jimmy on the sidelines, the emotionless Jimmy? It was like he and this program was awakened in the second half against Penn State. And we wondered all of last week, was it a one-off? Their championship hopes, backs against the wall. Maybe they come together to give it one last college try. Or was it a trendsetter? Did they find something that was going to parlay itself to something of meaning the rest of this season with 3 key rivalry games to go? Well, we now have our answer. It was a demolition. It was a destruction. It was a dissection. Notre Dame absolutely embarrassed, one of the worst losses on a national stage the Irish have suffered since the last time they were on a national stage. Let's face it, this is kind of what Notre Dame does in these situations. I'm just happy that this team obliged them with their nationally televised beating in a primetime game for once. And Michigan needed this badly. It's maybe the most this program has needed a win of this magnitude in many, many a year. In fact, I think it's the biggest win of the Jim Harbaugh era. When you look at how the narratives have changed, where the hope and the optimism has suddenly returned, a lot of the national shows, I just couldn't bring that I love, like on Sirius XM. I just couldn't listen to them the last few weeks. And I don't blame them, okay? It's not their fault. They're only saying what we were all watching. They can only give you the narrative that the program is feeding the content for. It's up to the program to change the narrative by changing the content. And so I decided, you know what? I wonder if the narrative is changing, or we're still going to hold on to our Harbaugh derangement syndrome. And man, I listened to a lot of those shows on Monday and Tuesday, and the narrative was like night and day difference. And now suddenly there's talk of, hey, could they win out? You know what? Let's just enjoy this one win for now. Now Michigan goes on the road to Maryland. Granted, they're an absolute dumpster fire at the moment, and we're all being reminded why I believe Mike Loxley's career coaching record is 3-4,012. Okay, it's not that bad. It just seems like it, as the tires have totally come off on the Terps, and they're now a tire fire. But we have seen Michigan go on the road in the white jerseys against teams not named Rutgers and struggle in these situations. So let's see what they look like on Saturday. Now, I suspect they're going to look good. I think that you are watching now the team we thought we were going to see all season long. And yes, I know there's a temptation to say, man, where's it been? I'm going to instead choose to enjoy it while it lasts. And then at the end of the year, hey, this could still be a special season. You still got a game at the end. And yeah, they look unbeatable. 50 years ago, they looked unbeatable too. 50 years ago, it looked like Michigan had no chance as well. And the Wolverines came into that game with 2 losses, which is likely what they're going to come into the game with this year as well. coming off a year before where it was supposed to be a top 10 showdown for the Big Ten championship in Columbus, and Ohio State just depanted the Wolverines in Bump Elliott's last game, scoring a touchdown in the waning minutes to go up 50-14, putting the starters back in the game to go for two. And when asked afterwards, why did Woody try to run up the score on poor old Michigan like that? Why did he go for two? He infamously said, because I couldn't go for three. The circumstances surrounding that game 50 years ago and the game here 50 years later are becoming eerily similar. But Michigan has work to do before we get to that point. And that is to continue this momentum and go on the road and say, hey, Maryland wants to be destroyed. We will gladly oblige them at noon Eastern on Saturday. Go Blue. Hey, I want to introduce you to a brand new partner of ours here at Michigan Podcast, Hero Soap Company. Check these guys out. Veteran-owned soap company. Sign up for a subscription and get soap delivered right to your door each and every month. 3 different options starting at just $5 a month, all the way up to the Battalion package, or as I like to call it, the Buckeye package. 3 bars of soap each month for those Buckeye fans out there who need some extra help getting that stink off. The best part of this is Hero Soap Company donates a portion of each purchase to help veterans and active military, something all of us can unite behind, Wolverines, Buckeyes, Sparties alike. Use the promo code Michigan Podcast and get 10% off of your order. Promo code Michigan Podcast, all one word, and get high quality soap without having to go to the store. Hero Soap Company. Check them out online at herosoapcompany.com. Let freedom clean. Back here on Michigan Podcast, time for the roundtable portion of our program. Michael Spath from WTKA Ann Arbor, Brandon Brown also from WTKA, both also joining me each day at WolverineDigest.com as well, and joining me right now on Michigan Podcast. And gentlemen, it's a lot more fun to be doing this after what we saw on Saturday night, where Michigan delivered Notre Dame really its worst loss in a marquee nationally televised game since its last one. But it's good to see Michigan being the wrecking ball for a change. And we all wondered all of last week, could this team get back up emotionally when a lot of its season goals were gone before we even got to November? And then B, was that second half performance, the backs against the wall, Alamo Bowl, that was a Freudian slip, Alamo rallying cry, with no back door, or was that the trendsetter in the start of this team, kind of as Coach Harbaugh said a couple of weeks ago, hitting their stride? Michael, I'll start with you. I think we now have affirmative answers to both of those questions.
Yes and yes. And you know what? A half of a football game in the first 7 weeks is an anomaly. 6 quarters, straight quarters, tends to be more of a trend. And what we saw out of Michigan on Saturday was its most dominant performance, arguably of the Harbaugh era. If you want to debate whether the Penn State or the Wisconsin game last year or the Florida destruction of the bowl game in 2015, that's all fine and good. But considering the stakes going into this one, Michigan coming off of a heartbreaking loss at Penn State, again being an underdog, facing a top 10 team. The conditions, the last time we saw conditions like that, it was the 2017 Michigan State game when the Wolverines lost 14-10. There was so much riding on this game, and they came out like gangbusters. And from, across the board, man-to-man, Shea Patterson and Zach Charbonnet, Hassan Haskins, the entire offensive line, the defensive line, Hutchinson and Kwity Paye, Cam McGraw, you just go down the list. Every single guy, you could make the argument that played maybe the best game of their career. And that's really impressive. And I always say, the philosophy that we have on Michigan Podcast, on Wolverine Digest, and certainly on Inside the Huddle on WTKA is criticize when it's warranted and praise when it's warranted. And right now, we should be praising these guys because they definitely deserve all the laudits we can throw at them.
So, Brandon, this was an effort literally no one outside of the program saw coming. Was there a moment on Saturday watching the game from the press box where you thought, I think I think this is going to be something special here. What was that? Was there a galvanizing moment early in the game that made you think this is going to be different than what we saw the first half of the season?
Man, I don't know if there was ever really one particular moment. It was just kind of a building, snowball effect of how they were running the ball and how much they rattled Ian Book, and how things just seemed to be working in really tough conditions. I mean, we've talked about this on the radio today. It's really kind of hard to give an accurate grade to, maybe how Shea Patterson played in terms of his numbers, or how the wide receivers did, just because they didn't need to throw the ball. One, because the running game was working so well, and two, it was damn near impossible to throw the ball, especially in the first half. But they just kind of did what they wanted the whole game on both sides of the ball, and we haven't seen that all year, and not any form of consistent stringing of plays together on either side of the ball. So I don't really remember one particular moment thinking like, wow, this is really going to be a big time game for Michigan, but it just felt like from the beginning, they went down and scored first. You would have liked for it to be a touchdown, but they got points. And then from then on, it was just everything they wanted to do was working. And Ian Book was just not ready for that environment, not ready for that defense, maybe not ready for the elements. Whatever the case was, he was just, it's the worst. Granted, I haven't watched every Notre Dame game while he's been the starter, but I have to imagine that's the worst game he's had. And it wasn't him having the worst game ever. It was Michigan forcing him into the worst game he's had. The weather certainly played a factor. But it just felt like Michigan was in control, and the scoreboard obviously reflected that. It was a dominant performance. The running game was really on point. Outrushing Notre Dame 303-47 is maybe the most telling stat of the game, especially given the conditions. And it just really felt like Michigan could do no wrong, and that's the first time we saw that all season. And it felt good to watch that. It just felt good to watch that. I don't remember having like a banging your head on the table moment for this, or banging your head up against the wall moment during that game, and that's the first time I can say that in the 2019 season.
You look at the defense. Go ahead, Michael. Go ahead.
In terms of a galvanizing moment, I agree with Brandon. I don't know if there's one specific, because even like the Zach Charbonnet run early in the game, we've seen him do that a couple of times. I got to say, second quarter, Shea Patterson pulling on the read option and getting a 22-yard run, which I believe is the longest run of the season for Shea Patterson so far. And kind of essentially the one thing that we've been begging for more of Shea to do this year is pull on the read option. Him getting around the corner, Nick Eubanks out in front of him blocking. I think they got nabbed at like the 2 or 3 yard line, and Charbonnet scored right thereafter. But that was the moment that I thought, okay, this is a little bit different. He's on point. He's ready to play. And I just think the way that the offensive line played, Hassan Haskins gashing Notre Dame in the first half, those were the moments right there where you thought, okay, this team has come to play, and I don't know that Notre Dame's going to be able to stop them all night.
My favorite play in the game was up 31-7, and Notre Dame has put its backup quarterback in the game, and it's 3rd and forever, and he scrambles for like a yard or something, and Notre Dame gets called for holding. And, the textbook play there, you decline it, you make them punt it, you get the ball back. And Harbaugh declines the penalty just so their backup quarterback has to run for his life against Don Brown's defense one more time. I said this at the top of the show, guys, when they declined that penalty, I literally looked down, and maybe it's just because I'm getting old now and I'm just growing hair out of every orifice imaginable, but I looked down now, and like in real stop motion animation style, like in a Chia Pet commercial, I literally saw like a couple of hairs grow out from my chest. Like I felt like I de-aged like 15 years, my testosterone level, like I had been given an injection. And I'm watching the game in my man cave in Iowa by myself, and I screamed out like, hell yeah, that's Jimmy Harbaugh. That's what's your deal, Jimmy. And then they start tacking on touchdowns afterwards. And I don't know what you guys were thinking up in the press box, but that to me, that's the coach we thought we were hiring 5 years ago. I don't know where we've seen barely glimpses of it over the last couple of years, but I'd like him to stick around a little bit longer, Brandon.
And you know what? It's funny you mentioned a play like that was I mean, not insignificant, but that's not that's not one that's going to be tweeted about or put up on the billboards for the best play of the game or anything like that. But there was another one. It resulted in a touchdown. I don't remember when I'm bad at moment type stuff like this, but I remember the particular play later in the game in the second half at some point in a situation where normally we'd see a run or a nice safe play, and they were throwing the ball. I think it was sometime in the third quarter. I think it was the Nico Collins touchdown. Throw it up to him. Let him go make a play on it. It was a 50-50 ball, which in the case of Nico Collins, that's more like a 70-30 ball. And we've been wondering, where the hell has that been all year? Why don't they give these guys a chance to make a play? There were several plays sprinkled throughout that game that I agree with you, where it was like, we got them kind of down. Let's go ahead and put our foot on their neck and break their will, and it worked. And it worked. And that's the kind of guy, again, like you just said, that we thought we were getting, that we thought was ruthless and was had that killer mentality, and it just hasn't shown up as much. But there were several plays sprinkled throughout that game where it just felt a little bit different, and it felt and man, was it evident against a team like Notre Dame, who's a very good team and has recruited comparably to Michigan. So this isn't a pushover by any stretch, but it felt like Jim Harbaugh and the rest of the guys wanted to really make a statement.
Michael, I know you want to comment on that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sitting here, chomping at the bit. 3rd and 16 is, it was 3rd and 3 from the 16-yard line is the play that Brandon's talking about. And instead of running the ball, he threw a touchdown pass to Nico Collins in the third quarter, up 24-7. Yeah, I think in that moment, Jim Harbaugh channeled his inner Bo Schembechler and told Notre Dame to go whatever themselves. To hell with Notre Dame. I mean, it was really beautiful to see that Jim Harbaugh, that step on the neck, that the guys getting up from the mud and you push them in the back and you stand over the top of them. And maybe the good thing is that with Michigan State still on the schedule and the opportunity to maybe end D'Antonio's career at Michigan State, I think Jim Harbaugh will relish that. I think Jim Harbaugh is aware of history enough to know the comments even before Jim Harbaugh arrived in Ann Arbor that Mark D'Antonio made. The pride comes before the fall, and picking on Mike Hart, and all the different things that he did, and the moment of silence after they lost to was it Appalachian State? Mm-hmm. I mean, all the things that he has done. I gotta imagine that Jim Harbaugh has been stockpiling those, has been aware of those, and if you look at the Michigan State schedule and where they are, that could be, if Michigan goes out there and beats them like they beat Notre Dame on Saturday, that could be the end for Mark D'Antonio. And I think that's going to motivate Jim Harbaugh considerably in this game. And then he's going to have Ohio State at the end of the year to get that. I don't even think it's a gorilla at this point. It might be like a hippo with an elephant on top of it, with a 747 on top of it off of his shoulders. So it was great to see against Notre Dame. As you said, Steve, you want to see it the rest of the way. Even if they're up against Maryland, if they're up 30-7 at the half, go out there with Shea Patterson for a half of a quarter at least and put up 14 more points, and then put Dylan McCaffrey. And then in the post game, you talk about what a great game Josh Gaddis called. You know what I'm saying? With Mike Loxley on the sidelines. That's what's your deal, Jimmy, Mike. That's who we thought we were hiring. Yeah, absolutely. And, he was asked about that this week about Gaddis going back to Maryland. He didn't really give a real strong answer like that's going to bother Gaddis. But you got to believe that Jim Harbaugh is aware of that and is going to give Josh Gaddis every opportunity to outshine Mike Loxley this weekend.
Let's go to the defense, Mike. I'll come back to you. Listen, if you give Don Brown a stationary target, he will punish you. And Notre Dame gave him that on Saturday night. And you're also seeing now more and more adjustments to crossing routes, man beaters, things that have kind of ruined him in some of these big games the last couple of years. You're seeing him make adjustments to some of these things. Helps to put a guy with the athleticism of Daxton Hill in the slot to be the guy to execute that, of course. But the way his defense has played, and it was rightfully criticized for failing in another big game on the road at Wisconsin early in the year. But since that game, Michael, Michigan has given up total 259 yards rushing total in every game played since the Wisconsin game. Got to give the guy props for that.
No, again, it goes back to when a guy really performs and has a game like that, you have to give them praise. And this rush defense has really come on. I think you'd love to get a redo against Wisconsin because I think they've figured some things out. I think the presence of Michael Dwumfor, who returned after that game, has allowed Carlo Kemp to be his best football player. The growth that Aiden Hutchinson and Kwity Paye have made in the last few weeks up front has been significant. And then the addition of Cam McGrone in the middle of the defense. I mean, we had a long conversation on our show on Tuesday about Cam McGrone and where he stacks up to, ready for it, Devin Bush. And that, before the season began, the big thing was, well, Michigan has nobody on this defense that can adequately replace Devin Bush. And here we are in week 8 talking about how Michigan has not only someone who's adequately done it, but who's someone who has thrived and might, before his career is over with, go down as recognized as Devin Bush for the athleticism, the speed, the big playability that he's had. I think his addition has been central to the success of the defense the last couple of weeks. Brad Hawkins and Josh Metellus have done a nice job coming up from the safety position to fill gaps and fill holes. They've stretched things out where teams that are trying to go, outside, outflank them, they can't do that because Michigan has more speed than them. Their success against the ground has been really impressive. And then in terms of the pass game, yeah, they did a great job. I mean, 8 of 25 for Ian Book. He looked every bit as feeble as Brian Lewerke did a year ago for Michigan State. And there wasn't, they didn't have a slot receiver like KJ Hamler that could take advantage of Michigan. Michigan had learned how to defend that in a week. I think when Michigan plays Ohio State in a couple of weeks, we're really going to see how good they've gotten against crossing routes and whether or not they've shored up that area of weakness that they had against Penn State. And I know that's really unfair to go like, oh, well, they've got to do it against Ohio State. But let's face it, they do have to do it against Ohio State, and that's going to be the best athletes that they face all year. It's going to be the best offensive line they face. It's going to be the best offense they face. And so he's going to get one more great opportunity to showcase himself here. And I hope that each of these games has been building up to that moment and that the defense and Don Brown is ready for it.
Brandon, latest analytics out from SP Analytics. That's Bill Connolly over at ESPN.com. Michigan right now in his adjusted defensive efficiency ratings, which takes into account tempo of the teams you faced, as well as the strength of schedule. Michigan's adjusted defensive efficiency right now, number 2 in the country.
Yeah, not surprised. I mean, you just talked about some of the numbers. The amount of the lack of rushing yards they've given up, and some of the performances they've had against pretty good teams. And yeah, it's been really, really impressive since that Wisconsin game. And I'll echo what Mike said about, man, you really wish they could get a do-over, because I truly think that was just a bad day. It was like an imperfect storm, if you will, for Michigan. Like, Wisconsin hasn't looked that good since that game, and Michigan hasn't looked that bad since that game. So it's just like, it was like one of those days where one of the teams is on point, the other team is not. Jonathan Taylor got going early and often, and I just don't think it was really bad when it happened, and it counts just how it counts, and you can't take away anything from Wisconsin in that game or the performance they had. But if they played again, it wouldn't look like that. I'm positive of that, just because of the way the teams have trended, and I think everything just clicked for Wisconsin that day, and it didn't for Michigan. So since that game, for them to be ranked as highly as you just said, number 2, I'm not surprised at all. Cameron McGrone has been a revelation in that defense. The speed he's playing with, he led the team in tackles by a wide margin against Notre Dame. He had 12. The next closest person was Khaleke Hudson with 5. So he's been a phenomenal addition to that squad and bringing some speed that was much needed. And then you mentioned Daxton Hill. I still think he's being underutilized a little bit, but it's, they've started to recognize where he can help them and what kind of players he can defend. And he's still coming along. He's a true freshman. But, yeah, I mean, the defense has been a lot of fun to watch, and a lot of guys are making plays, and you can count on just about anybody. You think about who Michigan trots out there on defense week in and week out, and there's really not anybody you've got to worry about. And that's a nice feeling to have, with some of the upcoming games, the rivalry game against Michigan State, and then obviously, the big one at the end of the year. So not surprised by that number, and I expect it to keep getting better. I really do, because that's what's happened since that Wisconsin game.
So we've been forced, because of the way the team has played up until this point, we've been forced to have a lot of existential conversations in a pessimistic way. Now we get the opportunity to have it in a different way. And I mentioned at the top of the show that a lot of the national programs that I enjoy listening to in my free time, I've had to stay away from them the last few weeks because I don't fault them for it. It's the right narrative because it's based off of how Michigan has played, but I also just, that's not fun to me, is just to do the time warp and circle the drain again, so I've been staying away from listening. I've tuned in this week after the win to see, are we still, did the narrative change, or is it just Harbaugh derangement syndrome now and he can do no right? And the narrative has changed dramatically from a lot of the media from what I have seen. So we now get to talk about what this season could still accomplish. And that comes down to these next 3 games where Michigan will be a favorite in all of them, including at Indiana, which right now is on its pace to having its best season in 25 years. And that's been a place that Michigan has struggled so far under Jim Harbaugh, but have come out victorious. But it's been double and triple overtime. And then there's the game at the end of the season. Let me say this about Ohio State, and I have been saying this since week 3. If they play defense like that and they run the football like that, I don't think anybody's beating them. And I mean, I've said this since week 3, not in the Big Ten, anybody. But I will say this, guys, and we saw this with Kansas State against Oklahoma on Saturday. They have not had to put on a white jersey and play a team with a pulse all year long. Michigan State at home, Wisconsin at home, Penn State in a few weeks will be at home. The one road game they were supposed to have that was supposed to be tough was Nebraska. Scott Frost is 8-12 in his first 20 games there, with more off-the-field problems than on-field victories. Cincinnati, that was at home. We haven't seen Justin Fields go on the road, and I don't count Bloomington, Indiana. He hasn't gone on the road in a real snake pit with a team that could punch back, that might give him some looks and hit him a little bit and play in that kind of an environment. Have you thought about that at all, Michael, or is it just too early yet because we've still got 3 other games to go?
No, I think the victory over Notre Dame allowed people to look ahead a little bit, and especially since the next 2 weeks you've got a game against Maryland that is completely fallen off the face of the earth. And then you've got a bye week. So I think you can look ahead a little bit to Ohio State and measure yourself up against them. And you're right. I mean, right now they look like if not the best team in the country, number 2, with LSU as number 1. The way that Justin Fields is playing, the athletes that they have at running back and on the outside, I mean, they look like an unbeatable team. But we've seen stranger things happen. And I think what the game on Saturday did, and I wrote about this a little bit afterwards, is it gave everybody a 4-letter word. It gave everybody hope. And I think what we're going to find here is we're going to have Michigan, if they can avoid, I got to tell you, the trickiest game on the schedule is that game in Indiana.
Agreed.
That's remaining, because I don't think there's any motivation issues for Michigan State. I think the way the Michigan State's offense is playing, they're downright atrocious. I think Michigan comes out and pounds them, honestly. The Indiana game on the road the week before Ohio State is a dangerous game. But, when you look ahead, I think you're going to find Michigan very likely 9-2 going into that Ohio State game, and people right back where they were a year ago, where they believe something special is possible. And it's up to this program. It's up to Jim Harbaugh. It's up to Shea Patterson and the offensive coaches and the offensive players and Don Brown and all these defensive guys to do something differently this year, to pull off the impossible and to beat these guys. It's got to happen at some point. But I like where Michigan is, and we had this conversation a week ago about whether or not the season was already a failure. No, they've got a chance to accomplish something here, but that only goes down as a accomplishment if they beat Ohio State. If they go 9-3 with losses to Wisconsin, Penn State, and Ohio State, I don't think you can give them a B. I think that's a C average type of year, and it's not what this. Then we have all those questions again about what did you bring Jim Harbaugh here for, and what did you accomplish. But if they win the rest of their games and they're 10-2 and they have a victory over Ohio State, we're going to look back on this season very, very fondly and maybe talk about it as a season that was able to propel them the next level.
Brandon, if that offensive line, which returned this year with 4 players who earned some form of all Big Ten status a year ago, and a very promising young player there, and Jalen Mayfield, who had a really good game against Notre Dame, and against probably, other than Penn State, the best edge pressure he has faced in his early collegiate career. If they can bottle that up with the talent and experience they have up front, they could do something special here at the end of the year. You get the final word. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it is, Ohio State, I'm taking your point to heart. I mean, they have not had to go on the road and beat a good team, and that's absolutely huge. I mean, you can name a few examples just in the recent weeks. Oklahoma losing to Kansas State on the road, Michigan losing to Wisconsin on the road the way that they did, Notre Dame just losing to Michigan on the road. It's tough. Wisconsin losing to Illinois. I mean, that's maybe the biggest shocker of the whole season. It's one of those things where I don't know, it's almost like you forget. Like the teams are just the team is really good. Ohio State's really good. I said earlier in the week, or yesterday or today, whatever it was, that they might have the two best players in college football on their respective sides of the ball.
Yeah.
And Justin Fields at quarterback, and Chase Young is the best defensive player in the country. So they've got as much talent as anybody, and they've played as good as anybody, and they've been blowing teams out, doubling up the spreads week in and week out. I mean, they've been as good as anybody could have imagined. But the road is a different animal, and you kind of I don't know what it's worth. I know spreads often take that into account, the home team versus the road team, but there have been some shocking developments on the road for some really, really good teams this year. And who says it can't be Ohio State at Michigan to be the next shocker? I think on a neutral field or in Columbus, I mean, they are just a machine. They have looked almost unbeatable, like Michael said, but coming to the big house, you never know. And if Michigan can continue to get better and that defense keeps taking it up a notch, offensive line continues to gel, running game really comes together, Shea Patterson keeps playing with confidence and starts to understand, I'm a pretty good weapon running the ball here a little bit. You never know. I'm not going to – if I had to put, my life savings in my house and my car and my future freedom up on the line for it, I'd probably still pick Ohio State, but I feel better about it now than I did a week or two ago, and that's really all you can ask for with 4 weeks until that game in late November.
And for those, because we get eyeballs of fan bases, particularly when we lose, we get lots of eyeballs of other fan bases that watch us and listen to this each week. If you're wondering what changed here in a week, what changed in a week is for the first time a team with 39 4- and 5-star recruits on it. For the first time, played for 4 quarters against a quality opponent, a brand of football that translates to being successful down the line. They hadn't done that the entire season. And that's what's different from from really every other game that Michigan has won this year. This is the first time we come away feeling better about the team after a game. Undeniably. Some of us thought that we felt better after the Penn State game. Others of us just thought, well, it's just another loss, so who cares? This is the first time everyone undeniably sees that we are better at the end of the game than we were when we started. Yes, it's frustrating that it didn't take place until the 8th game of the season, but it's better than not having taken place at all, because it looked a couple of weeks ago like that was going to be the case. And so I think that's what's changed, is you can see you saw a team on Saturday that you can now see being successful in these other games to come that we're talking about. Michael Spath and Brandon Brown from the Wolverine Digest, as well as WTKA. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us again here this week on Michigan Podcast. Go Blue.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
Michigan Podcast brought to you by Wolverine Digest, now part of Sports Illustrated. That's right, the SI.com network. That's myself, Steve Deace, Michael Spath, and Brandon Brown, bringing you tons of content each and every day at WolverineDigest.com, and it's all free. Analysis, video, commentary, breakdowns, everything you need to be an informed Michigan fan. You're going to get it every single day at WolverineDigest.com. And keep in mind, we don't require access to the program in order for us to generate content. So we give you unvarnished, unfiltered analysis. Yes, we're Michigan fans. We want Michigan to do well, but we don't see it any other way other than calling balls and strikes, and that includes the home team too. Go to WolverineDigest.com now. This week's Twitter poll results, we asked you, do you think Michigan will be 9-2 heading into the game, meaning you think they win their next 3? 82% of you said yes, and that would be my vote as well. But man, do not overlook the Hoosiers. Last 2 times we've gone down to Bloomington, it's been double and triple overtime, and right now they're on pace to have their best season since they won 8 games in 1994 at the end of the Bill Mallory era. That's a quarter century ago. All right, so do not sleep on Indiana, but I do think Michigan will be 9-2 heading into the game. Which brings us to our question of the week, and it comes from Drew. What do you think Michigan's toughest game between now and Ohio State happens to be? And Drew, I think it is that game in Bloomington. And the reason why is Michigan State, whatever Michigan State's best shot is. And that's really what we don't know in 2019. I mean, the Spartans have scored 17 total points in the month of October. 17 total points in the month of October, folks. All right, is that bad? That's pretty bad. Yet, I think we all know hair on fire, body on fire, soul on fire, couches on fire. Whatever they have to do to be max lit, Michigan State will be for that game. But Michigan knows that. Jim Harbaugh's never beaten Michigan State at home. It's a rivalry game. Michigan will be ready for Michigan State's best shot. They know about D'Antonio and the obsession. They get that. Indiana, to me, is the tougher game. I think Indiana right now is a better football team than Michigan State. They play more complementary football, and they have been so close to beating Michigan. Even the home games have been competitive. You took a great Devion Smith effort in the snow a couple of years ago in 2016, and then last year they kind of wrote the blueprint with those crossing routes. Former Michigan offensive coordinator Mike DeBoard was still their OC, and he kind of provided the blueprint that Ohio State would exploit a year later. And their red zone defense kept Michigan out of the end zone. I think Jake Moody kicked 5 or 6 field goals in that game. So they have been a nemesis to Michigan the entire Harbaugh era, even though Indiana has not beaten us since 1987. 1987 was the last time. 14-10, I want to say, was the score of that game down in Bloomington. So they have the confidence of knowing they can play with Michigan. It'll be a game given both teams' records. They may have a sellout crowd there without needing, a third of those fans to be the road team. So that could be a true home field environment for Indiana. They don't get that a lot when the big name programs come in. I think that's the tougher game in my view. And I think it's the toughest of the next 3 games for Michigan as well. But that's a really good question, Drew. And isn't it fun that we get back to now we can start talking football again instead of all the existential angst? I'm all for that. That's what I'm in this for. All right, I for Michigan to win. That's what we do this for. And then we have got to be honest about why we think they lost. But now we get to talk about a resounding victory and how does scoreboard for the next 14 years feel to you? I agree. Thanks for tuning in here this week to Michigan Podcast. I want to thank our friends at Detroit Sports Podcast for helping to promote this episode every week. Hey, if you've got a moment, please click subscribe, like, 5-star review, whatever is applicable there. If it's YouTube, Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher that you access us through, please, the more of those we get, it draws more eyeballs, helps us to find more Michigan fans like you. And feel free to share what we do every week with all the Michigan fans you know as well. We will be back at it again next week looking at the bye. We'll get into some college basketball talk as that season is about to get underway as well. Hopefully we're talking, and I expect we will, about a resounding Michigan win over the Terps. Until then, go Blue.